Continuing on in the Proverbs, and as I said last week, we covered the first 7 verses, which are like a built-in introduction to Proverbs. We gave a little bit of background just as far as, many of the Proverbs that we're looking at having been written by Solomon, and him being the wisest man in history, and that was a proclamation of the Lord, not of Solomon. It wouldn't be very wise to speak that way about yourself, but as we went through that introduction, we saw the purpose of the Proverbs, that the Proverbs are provided to provide wisdom for the simple, to actually open the eyes of the fool so that they would be able to see their need for wisdom. And then, of course, verse 7, in and of itself is really the foundation of the Proverbs, where it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." And we're going to see that theme show up again here today as we continue through chapter 1. But as we take a look at the remainder of chapter 1, we really are looking primarily at 2 Proverbs. And as we said last week, a lot of times we think about the Proverbs as these short, concise, little wisdom sayings, and many of them are. But when we go through the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs, we look at some lengthier Proverbs, where we might be looking at like one proverb that is like 9 verses long. Some people refer to them as parables, and a parable, even you could look at the parables of Jesus, that would still kind of fall into this category of a proverb or of wisdom literature. But today we look at these 2 Proverbs, verses 8 through 19, and then in verse 20 we kind of pick up the second part of that. And that's what we're looking at today as we finish off chapter 1 of Proverbs. And so let's read through verses 8 through 19, looking at this one singular proverb here. And it says in verse 8, it says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law or the instruction or teaching of your mother. For they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up alive like Sheol or the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse.'" The father continues in verse 15. He says, "My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owners." As we look at this proverb, this one begins off in verse 8. It says, "My son." And so what we're looking at here is we are still looking at the Proverbs of Solomon. And so I think that it's very appropriate for us to realize that this is Solomon, the wisest man in history, speaking to his own son, and he's giving him counsel. Now, he's written it out. We might look at this, and I think it's great for us to kind of look at it through the lens of this is fatherly wisdom, but just kind of keep in your mind that while we're looking at the Word of God, and all Scripture is inspired by God, it is God-breathed, including the Proverbs that were spoken from Solomon's mouth. And in fact, as we went back to verse 7 last week, we identify that wisdom begins and originates with the Lord. And so there really is not wisdom apart from God. And so whenever we hear someone say an amazingly wise thing, we can go, wow, if there's truth to that wisdom, which if there wasn't truth, it wouldn't be very wise. But if there's truth in that wisdom, then we would say, man, that's like the Lord revealing that right there. And sometimes even non-believers have a wise little thing that they can say. They're probably repeating it. They probably heard it from someone else. But wisdom originates from the Lord and with the Lord. But here is this wisdom that is speaking this fatherly advice to his son. And I think that it's important for us to receive this as wisdom from our Heavenly Father. You can also look at it as, man, this is the wisest man in history, Solomon speaking to his son, and there's probably something I can learn from that as well. Brian, would you mind just grabbing the back door and pulling it all the way? The wind's a bit breezy, and it's slapping that thing around. Thank you, sir. And so, my son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother. How many of you are parents? How many of you have told your kids, listen to me? Yeah, you know what I mean? Every caring parent longs for their children to receive what they have to offer them, okay? It's not merely a matter of, I'm important, you listen to me, okay? the kid, I'm sure, it sounds that way to him, and we might even phrase it that way. I've honestly said to my kids, I am older than you. I have been your age before. I know what you're looking at, what you're facing. I've been there, and I'm not there anymore. So learn from me. I've traveled where you're just starting. You know what I mean? And sometimes we have to speak in that really clear, simple way, like, listen to me, you know? But here's a father, he's speaking to his son, and he's saying, my son, hear the instruction of your father. We all want our kids to be able to learn from us and to glean from us, not so that we feel important and we feel like, finally, someone's listening to me, but because we understand that we have learned a variety of things, and some of those things we learned from others, and some of those things we learned on our own. Some of those are the things that we learned through the school of hard knocks. We learned it the hard way, and we don't want our kids to have to learn the hard way. And if you're listening to this right now, whether you're a kid, whether you're an adult, whether you're a grandparent, it doesn't matter what your age is, understand that the hard way is always the hard way. And no one really, in a right mind, chooses the hard way unless they know that the hard road is the better road to travel. That would be wise. But simply choosing the hard way because it's my way is not wise. And so what the father is saying to his son is the father is saying, my son, listen to your father's instruction and listen to what your mom has to say as well. In the New King James it says, the law of your mother, but the word literally just means teaching or instruction. Like, listen to what your mom is teaching you. He says in verse 9, he says, for they, that is the instruction or the wisdom of your parents, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. Quite literally, it's a garland or a wreath that is placed upon your head as an ornament of honor. It's almost like as if a prince is given not the crown of the kingdom upon his head, but he's given this garland that he gets to wear so that everyone knows there's the prince. That is someone who is honored. That is someone who is special. Or the princess, perhaps, receiving a necklace with a pennant on it so that everyone knows there's the princess. And so here the father is saying, he says that if you will receive and heed the instruction of your parents, he says these will be like ornaments of honor that are placed upon you for everyone to see. Now that might feed our pride a little bit, like, yes, I would like everyone to see and honor me, okay? But that's not at all what wisdom is communicating here. Wisdom is saying that when you receive instruction, and receiving instruction from anyone else always requires a degree of humility. And we're going to see that repeated over and over and over. Almost anything that you read in the book of Proverbs, you can read in between the lines, humility, humility, humility. Okay? But so when a child learns to learn from their parents, it's a pretty good indication that as they grow up and move on into the rest of their life, that they're going to continue in that posture of humility, whereby they're also able to learn from other people besides their parents. There's really not a child who learns in humility from their parent and then goes off as this proud bugger and won't listen to anyone else. Okay? Now, they might listen to their parent and be like, but that's not wisdom, okay? That's just pride going, I don't want to get spanked, but I'm going to stand here quietly, okay? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a child who hears and heeds the instructions of their parents. They learn that their parents have something to offer them. And if they learn that lesson as a child, then they will move on into life with that same understanding that there are still people older than me. There are still people who've been where I'm just starting to go. There are people who have already succeeded at what I continue to fail at. And so therefore, in humility, I recognize that there's great wisdom in learning and receiving from others. But it all begins with the child and their parent. And so if you are a parent in the room and you've still got kids under your roof, recognize that you're not just trying to get them to listen to what you have to say, but that you're wanting them to learn from others. And that might even change the way that you interact with them, because you're wanting to breed within them that posture of humility rather than just sheer obedience. Okay? So he goes on here, he says, again, for if you can do this, he says, they will be as graceful ornaments on your head and chains about your neck. That is, other people will see in you, and they will honor you because they see this humility they see this individual who is walking in wisdom. And that wisdom, the possession of that wisdom, is like a garland upon your head. It's like a necklace around your neck. In verse 10, he says, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Now that right there is kind of like, well, that's all you need to know. If sinners entice you, don't listen. But he goes on and he expands it, right? He says in verse 10, he says, if they say, come with us, let us lie in wait. That is to say, like, let us lay in ambush and shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Well, they have a cause for doing this, but it's not like they're getting even. It's not like there's someone who's done wrong and now they're going to capture them. It's just that these are innocent people, and they're going to lay in ambush so that they can kill them and rob them, okay? It says in verse 12, or the sinner is enticing them still, they say, let us swallow them up alive like Sheol or the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions or wealth. We shall fill our houses with spoil. It says, cast in your lot among us and let us have one person. You realize they're just describing piracy. Is all they're describing, right? These are land pirates. That's all they are, right? They're saying, we'll all be in this thing together. We'll look for the innocent. We'll look for where there's wealth, and we will lay in ambush. We will kill them, and we will take their stuff, and we'll all split it even amongst ourselves, you know? And so again, you know, so if you are young and you're being tempted to go live a life of piracy, the Proverbs has something to say to you. But so he says, you know, don't be enticed by this. They go on and they say in verse 14, cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. The father says in verse 15, my son, do not walk in the way with them. He says, don't go. Now, I would imagine that most of us reading through this temptation would be like, no, I'm never going to do that, and I don't anticipate any of my kids doing that. But some of us might realize, but my kids, especially if you have grown children out of the home, you realize they've done some pretty foolish things, and they've made some pretty poor decisions. And maybe you've got kids who've done time before. Maybe you've got kids who are still living this life whereby you realize, man, there is no integrity directing them. They may not have shed innocent blood per se. They may not be lying around, you know, to mug someone in a back alley and dump their body in a dumpster. But you still realize, yeah, but, you know, they're not quite going to Sunday school either. They're living a life somewhere in between. And we read this and we go, wow, this is really extreme. But this is the Father speaking wisdom. And the Father is speaking wisdom as if to say he's been there and he's heard that invitation before. As if he's the one who knows what it feels like to have that group of guys come around you and say, hey man, how about this? Let's go do this thing. And he knows what the pressure feels like. He knows the temptation to think, you know what, like here's a great opportunity for me to finally get ahead in life. I've been trying to work on honest living, but here's finally my opportunity to get ahead. He responds in verse 15. He says, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Now, verse 15 introduces us to a secondary element of this proverb. The first one is clearly, my son, when people come to tempt you and entice you to join them in their sin, and we would say whatever that sin is, he simply says, do not go with them. Don't do it. And I would say the don't do it is the primary theme of this proverb. But there's another element to it that's really important, and that is the influence of the company that we keep. Because he's saying, man, when the evil come to you and they entice you, do not walk the walk that they're walking. Don't go with them. Wisdom says identify evil for being evil and stay far from it. But pressure oftentimes draws us, and we feel like, well, it'll be okay. I mean, even if I just kind of walk with them, but don't necessarily do what they're going to do. My son, that's called being an accomplice. Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, I could stop any time, Dad. No, he's saying don't even go with them. Don't entertain them. Don't keep that kind of company. It's very reminiscent of Psalm 1:1 that says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Don't let ungodly people be your counselors. Nor does he stand in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. and in his law he meditates day and night. A wise person is very intentional in who they allow to influence them. Think about this. And I know that as I look through the room here, first of all, I don't see any young son in the room except my own. But we are all sons and daughters of our Heavenly Father, and this is the wisdom that proceeds from his mouth. And there's always temptation that is speaking and enticing and that is luring us. And it may not necessarily be a gang of murderous thieves that are enticing you to come join them in their exploits. But the wisdom continues to speak to each and every one of us, as it says, consider who or what is influencing you. It takes humility to recognize that we as human beings are easily influenced. We like to think that we're not. We like to think that, you know what, that's not going to be an issue for me. We like to think that we're going to continue to walk in our integrity, but all you have to do is spend enough time with the wrong people to realize that their wrong ways begin to wear off on you. We are not as resilient as we like to think that we are. And that is why God, through his word, refers to us time and time and time again with the best illustration or example of mankind as he can, and that is to call us sheep. We will just kind of follow along wherever the rest of the fold is going. We're like, oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Cliff diving. Let's give it a try. You know what I mean? It's like, we're just sheep. We're not supposed to jump off of cliffs. You know what I mean? But you spend enough time with the wrong people and you will begin to think the wrong way. And once you begin to think the wrong way, you will begin to walk the wrong way. Even when we look back at Psalm 1:1, as we did in the beginning of our study in the Psalms, there is a progression in this opening verse of the Psalms where it says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel, okay? Nor does he stand, nor does he sit. It's revealing this progression that if you begin to walk with someone, after a while you'll probably begin to stand. That is to kind of hang out with them. And after you're standing there for a while, you'll actually begin to sit down and make that your home. That's where you're going to stay for a while in the midst of the ungodly and with the scornful. And so the Father here is saying to the Son, he says, my son, do not go with them. Again, verse 15, my son, do not walk in the way with them. When you walk with the wrong people, you will begin to do the wrong things. And again, I know this sounds a little bit elementary, like as if, yes, that's what my high schooler needs to hear. But the reality is every living being, unless you somehow think that you are no longer human, every human being needs to hear the wisdom, and those who have some wisdom will hear the wisdom in it and realize, yes, it takes humility to realize that I can be influenced. Have you ever been hanging around a group of people, some non-believers, or maybe they're even professing believers, and they begin to make really coarse jokes that you don't think are appropriate, but you kind of chuckle nervously all the same? I found myself doing that just this last week. Someone just made, it was like a one-line comment, and I went, and I was realizing, what's that? Like, why am I so easily influenced? Like, why do I even care what they think? Why do I feel the need to affirm the fact that, yeah, that was funny? It wasn't funny. It was totally inappropriate. But it just reveals how easily we can be influenced by those around us. And so the Father, or wisdom, says, when you see evil, stay far from it. Don't think that you can walk next to it. Don't think that you can kind of walk and say, hey, we'll go down the same path. I'll just kind of keep a 3-foot distance. You know? You don't want to keep 6 feet. You want to keep like 60 feet. You don't want to straddle the fence. You want to stay squarely in your own yard. And so this is the Father's advice. Do not walk the way with them. Keep your foot from their path. Verse 16, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owner. And so he kind of moves in, or he wraps up this proverb with another illustration. It's kind of like a proverb within the proverb. And he says there in verse 17, he says, surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Now, this is kind of like a proverb like we would expect it from chapter 10 on. Like here's kind of like this little one-liner, like here's a piece of wisdom. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. Or if you're like me, you kind of look at the proverb and you scratch your head and you're like, huh? What does this mean? And it just means what you would imagine it to mean, right? It just simply means that if you're out there and you're trying to set a snare or a trap to catch a bird or an animal, okay? I think he chooses a bird because snares are used for birds, but it's the idea that it's kind of a simple animal, right? And so it's like if you put the trap out there and you bait it in front of them and they're sitting up on the fence and they're watching you spread out the net and put the spring for the trap and the rope and the food right in the middle. There's the little peanut, in the middle of this big trap, and the bird's watching you and the bird's going like this, and you walk away and you hide behind the bush waiting to catch your dinner. The bird just flies away. And all that the wisdom is saying, is like, listen, even a bird knows a trap when it sees a trap. Like the only way that a trap works is when a trap is unforeseen, that when the trap is well hidden and I don't see the dangers that are before me. But even a bird understands that when I see a trap and it's just left out in the open, that I don't go eat the peanut. Like I don't go for it. And you might say, wow, this is deep, deep wisdom once again. Do not fall for the peanut, okay? But as you look at the application here, he's speaking about these robbers, these murderous thieves, right? And they're the ones that are laying in wait. They're the ones that are setting the traps. They're the ones that are waiting to ambush the innocent. And there is this element here that the father is saying, but their trap is going to be sprung on themselves, that they're going to get caught in their own ambush, that even as they're waiting to shed the blood of the innocent, what's going to happen is truly they're going to succeed in shedding their own blood, okay? So there is definitely the theme of you reap what you sow. And this is, again, God's divine justice. We love it. We love it when God does this, when he takes the evil and he turns the tables on them so that their evil backfires in their own face, and they're the ones who are undone. We love it. You know what I mean? In fact, anytime we watch a movie and there's not a good sense of justice in the end of it, we kind of go, huh? We were watching a show, I don't know, last week. I forget even what it was. But we were watching some show, and it finishes, and Leah goes, that's not the end. And I go, yeah, that's the end. And she's like, that was a terrible ending, And it was, I don't even think it was a true story. It's one thing when a true story has an ending that's kind of unresolved, but when it's not a true story, it's still like, well, so we kind of had to work through the idea of how this worked out and why it was actually an okay ending, but it just didn't have the sense of resolution that you're longing to have. And that longing for that resolution is the instilled sense of justice that is within us as human beings when we just know that's not right. But that instilled sense of justice gets fulfilled by God in the ultimate sense when Jesus Christ returns at his second coming. That is when ultimate justice is served. But between now and then, God continues to give us little tastes, little appetizers of that justice. He doesn't allow injustice to just go on and on and on and on and on. We don't see every injustice resolved the way that we want to see it or in our timing necessarily. And so by faith, we understand no, justice is coming. And because we truly believe that justice is coming, we walk the walk. And we don't compromise because we understand who the judge is and that there is no hiding from him. It's not a matter of what I can get away with. It's a matter of knowing I will stand before my heavenly Father and I will give an answer. As we come back to this, there's this element in the bird net parable here. That yes, they will get what they deserve and their own trap will spring on themselves, but there's something even better at work in this, okay? And as we look at this, it says, again, verse 17, surely, okay, it's kind of like, hello, okay? Surely everyone knows that in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Even a bird knows a trap when it's left out in the open, right? But as he goes on, he says, but they, the murderous thieves, they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. It's as if to say that these murdering thieves see and understand that there is a trap. And the trap is simply living this life of murder, living this life of ill-gotten gain. Okay? And that's the term there that's used in verse 19. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. Okay? That in the New King James, you could almost read this and be like, well, don't be greedy for gain. You know, like, well, is it wrong for me to want to like get a raise? It's not talking about that. Okay? Is it wrong for me to make a profit on something? No, it's not talking about that. The Hebrew word that's used there for gain is a word that almost always, not entirely, but the majority of the time, it has an element of unjust gain to it. And that's why some translations use the word of dishonest gain or ill-gotten gain. It's a deceitful sort of a gain. It's the idea, that you're selling something to someone and you know that it's not what you're selling them, but you're telling them that it is. Oh, yes, the engine was just rebuilt 12,000 miles ago. Why are you selling it? Oh, family problems, just gotta, let this beauty go, But the reality, you didn't have that thing rebuilt 12,000 miles ago. It's about to blow up in the next 10 miles. They'll be lucky if they get home in that jalopy, right? And so you know that you're being dishonest in what you're telling them. Yes, and it was actually used in, the caravan that JFK was driving when he got assassinated. This vehicle was? Oh, yes. And, wow, amazing. How much do you want for it? Well, just $2,000. You can have it. It's dishonest. You know that it's dishonest. It's ill-gotten. And again, the father here in giving the wisdom is really giving the most extreme example possible. They're murdering thieves. But he's saying that dishonest gain, and this whole proverb hinges on verse 19. This dishonest gain will take away the life of those who possess it. Again, it's not just that I'm looking for a profit, I'm looking to get a raise. It's not talking about an honest day's work. It's talking about dishonest gain, whatever that looks like. And I would say whatever degree that it is. See, wisdom says, my son, stay away from that temptation. Stay away. Stay far away. And all of us understand the temptation of compromise. All of us understand, I could probably just come out of this a little bit better if I just make this small compromise. But understand that every small compromise is just a stepping stone to greater ones. And in fact, the moment that we begin to take small compromises, those steps of small compromise, just think about it in a very literal picture, that you are taking a step in a particular direction. And that small step of compromise is a step in the direction of dishonesty. You're now turning away from integrity, and you are now pursuing integrity. That should be a concern, and wisdom gets it. Wisdom says, you're looking the wrong way. Well, I'm just looking the wrong way. I'm not going the wrong way. Looking the wrong way is the first step of going the wrong way. Well, I'm not out of the yard yet. I'm just closer to the fence. Son, what are you doing on the fence? Get off of the fence, son. I'm not in the neighbor's yard. Every one of these is a small compromise, and it moves. I've had plenty of conversations with my kids where I share what I think is a piece of wisdom to them, some counsel to them, and they'll say, well, is that necessarily wrong? Is it wrong if I do this thing? And I say, it's not necessarily wrong, but it is not wise. It's just that simple. And so when we depart from wisdom, our eyes are now focused on the wrong direction, and we may begin to make those small compromises that lead to larger compromises, and before long, the son is walking or living out a life of piracy. Say, how did your son ever become a pirate anyways? That all began when he just started to look the wrong way. And then he began to lean the wrong way and walk the wrong way, and before long he was out of our sight. And there he is. Verse 19 again, so are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owner. Now, with verse 19 really clear in our minds, we go back to verse 17 and 18, the bird net proverb. Okay? Because as we go back to that, the emphasis there is that even a bird knows that it's not wise to go eat that peanut. Even a stupid bird knows that you don't think that you're going to think the trap. But those who are enticed to do evil believe that I can outsmart the trap, that I'll get away with it. Other people get caught, but not me. Okay? Now, maybe they are the smartest thief in history. Okay? But there's only one smartest thief in history. I don't know who it is. But I mean, there's only one who is the smartest, and everyone else is not as smart. But every one of them thought that they would get away doing what they were going to do, that somehow it wouldn't catch up with them. And wisdom says, listen, it will catch up to you, because wisdom proceeds from the Lord, and it is the Lord who ultimately judges each and every soul. And so there is no escape. And so wisdom says, listen, you can't live for the temporal here and now. I think I might get away with it. If you understand that at the end of my days, I'm going to stand before the one who knows all things and judges all things, and who is just in his very nature. And so wisdom says, fear the Lord. And those who fail to fear the Lord are those who think, I don't need the Lord or his wisdom or his ways. I can do this, and I can get away with this. And so, again, it unfolds before us. And what the Father is truly saying in the bird net proverb is he's saying, those who think they're so smart as to outwit the, quote, system are as foolish as a bird who sees this is wrong, but I'm going to go there anyways. I know I can get that peanut and get away with it. But the wise understand that traps have but one purpose, and that is to trap. It's not a benevolence program. It's not a caring for a specific species of birds program. It's just a trap, and it's only there for one reason. And wisdom says, oh, that's a trap. Why would I go there? It's kind of like listening to the devil when he talks. You know what I mean? You can hear some piece of counsel, but if you know that the counsel comes from the devil's mouth, it doesn't matter how wise it sounds. You know the source of it, and you know what the source, what their agenda is, what their purpose is. A trap is only to trap. And when the father of lies speaks, it doesn't matter how good it sounds, how it might just be that opportunity you've been waiting for your whole life. Finally, this is it. It might be it, finally. Not your chance to get ahead, but your chance to finally be swallowed up into the grave, into the pit, just as you were anticipating to happen to others. And so verse 19 kind of brings it all together as we wrap up this opening proverb from this section of verses 8 through 19. And it basically is this challenge to ask yourself, what do you prioritize? Is it profit or is it life? What is it? And this isn't like this clear-cut proverb about money and its snares, but more so about greed and its snares. And again, we've already said it, there's nothing wrong with an honest day's wage. Amen. Go labor well and enjoy the fruits of your labors. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not what this proverb is addressing in the least. This proverb is addressing when we begin to compromise for the sake of gain. That's ill-gotten gain. And when we begin to compromise for the sake of gain, our priorities have now been focused on getting ahead rather than actually enjoying life. And the world will tell you this lie all the time, won't it? Just a little more and then you'll be happy. Just a little more and then you'll be happy. But the wise man says, you know what? Godliness with contentment, that's where great gain is to be found. We move on in to our second proverb for today, and that's going to begin in verse 20. And we'll read through the entirety of this. And as we go through this, This is basically wisdom is going to be personified. And so as we read through this, wisdom is going to be personified as if wisdom is a person. In this case, it's actually a she, and she's going to be speaking and interacting, kind of giving this invitation, giving a rebuke. And this isn't the only time that we're going to see the personification of wisdom. But it says in verse 20, it says, wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses at the openings of the gates in the city. She speaks her words. Verse 22, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. And wisdom continues to say, and think of this as wisdom standing out in public. Wisdom continues to say in verse 24, because I have called and you refused, I have stretched out my hand and no one regarded. Because you disdained all my counsel and would have none of my rebuke, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes like a storm, and your destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. Verse 28, then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel and despised my every rebuke. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their own way and be filled to the full with their own fancies. For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. As we take a look at this in a little bit longer than the previous proverb, we have wisdom here again personified. And it's wisdom basically giving a public declaration or invitation. It says, wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses at the openings of the gates in the city. All you have to understand in that is wisdom is saying, I have gone out into the public square and I've said, attention, everybody. I have an offer to make. And this is wisdom offering herself in this situation to all those who are in need of wisdom. And we're going to get more so into the invitation of wisdom as we continue on into the next few chapters. But for today, this section of it really is just emphasizing the call or the cry of wisdom, saying, here I am. I am here and I am ready to pour myself out upon you. It's a public invitation. She speaks her words, and in verse 22, she says, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. As we look at just this opening declaration by wisdom, wisdom addresses the simple ones. Now, we addressed that last week. We talked about some of our key phrases that we're going to encounter throughout the Proverbs. But, the simple person, or if you want to use the word the simpleton, the simple person is simply the person who's gullible, naive. Oftentimes the context in the Proverbs is that it's someone who's young. They don't have much life experience, or maybe they're not young. Maybe they're older, but they're still gullible and naive. Okay? One great way to look at the simple is that the simple is a person who has thoughts, but they haven't really thought their thoughts through. They lack the discernment of understanding the consequences of their actions. And most of us would like to think that we learn from our mistakes, but the simple, they really don't. They manage to get through life somehow. How they didn't get run over by a train yet, we're not sure. But they go through life, and they really don't learn from their mistakes. They might think the best of people who they shouldn't really be thinking of at all, let alone walking with them or entertaining them. But so she speaks her words, wisdom does. She says, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? Okay, you're simple, but how long are you going to continue to love your simplicity? Like, when are you going to desire something more? When are you going to desire to have wisdom? When are you going to desire to actually possess discernment so that you don't keep repeating the folly of your mistakes over and over again? She goes on in verse 22, the middle of it, she says, for scorners delight in their scorning. A scorner is just someone who mocks, they scoff. They're someone who laughs at other individuals and makes fun of them as if, man, they're just an absolute idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. You had some friend like that in junior high or high school. Your parents told you something, like, yeah, your parents don't know what they're talking about. My name's Eddie, and I know the reality of the world. I'm 12. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay. Your parents said what? Oh, man. That's the scorner. That's the scoffer. That's the mocker, right? It says, for scorners delight in their scorning. They love to do it. Why? Because it makes them feel superior. You know, they love to laugh at other people because they're like, oh, man, they don't know anything. And then, of course, the last line of verse 22, it says, and fools hate knowledge. Now, verse 22 is totally worth looking at kind of through a little bit of a literary lens, okay? Because if you look at verse 22 again, how long will you simple ones? Will you love simplicity? For scorners delight in their scorning. We would expect the closing line to say, and fools like their folly. But it doesn't say that, right? It says, and fools hate knowledge. And so there's 3 lines here, okay? And the first line is kind of like an equal, if you will. It says, you know, like, how long will you simple ones love your simplicity? Line 2 follows that same format. How long will the scorners delight with their scorning? And we would expect verse 3 to follow suit and say, and fools to love their folly. But it doesn't. It flips it around and becomes this contrast. And it doesn't tell us what fools love. It tells us what fools hate. And the reason for that, I believe, is to draw more attention to it. Because we'd be like, oh, yeah, and fools love their folly. No. And fools hate knowledge. What? Well, I don't understand. Like, the poet kind of got off track here, you know, like he missed it. You know, he's supposed to keep following that same format as he's going through here. And the reason for that, again, is to draw our attention. What? It's something different. It's supposed to grab our attention so that we kind of look at that one thing and we're like, wait, that's different. That's not what I was expecting it to say. It doesn't tell me what fools love. It tells me what fools hate. And this draws attention to this because there's a lot to be said about why fools are foolish. It's not necessarily always because they love being foolish, but it's because they hate knowledge. They hate the idea that someone else knows something that they don't know. They hate the idea that I have to learn from someone else, that there's someone else who knows something that I don't know. I hate that. And so in their foolishness, they continue to be a fool because they refuse any outside knowledge, any wisdom, anything that doesn't originate with themselves. Oh, I hate that. And you realize very simply at the core of this is just pride. Pride. The fool isn't a fool because they necessarily like a worldly good time. And I love having a worldly good time, and so I continue even though it's a bit foolish. It's not that. It's that they kick against and they resist the idea that there's someone who knows something more than I do. And I can't stand that. I don't want to hear anything from them. So again, we come back to it here. And he says there, again, this is wisdom speaking, right? How long, you simple ones, will you love your simplicity? How long, scorners or mockers, will you delight in your mocking and your scorning? And fools, how long are you really going to hate knowledge? And verse 23, wisdom says, turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. And so wisdom is saying, you know what? There's a change that needs to happen in your life. And I'm here to help you with that change. You don't have to continue in your folly. You don't have to continue being simple. Wisdom is here saying, I will pour my spirit out upon you, but you're going to have to recognize your need for wisdom. It's kind of like you've got a little child and you're trying to teach them to do something. They're like, I'll do it. And finally they're like, okay, you do it. And so they're doing it and they're doing it. You see them get frustrated. You see them failing, you know, and it's just not going well. And would you like some help? No, I'll do it. And they keep going and going and going. And you just realize, okay, you know, I mean, it's not life-threatening, so you're thinking, okay, I'll just let you keep doing it until you decide that you need some help. And then, of course, they do it, and as a parent, you're totally humiliated. You're like, oh, Lord, it's not how it's supposed to happen. It might happen that way, but they ultimately come to the recognition, I need help. Mama? And you're like, yes, I need help. Change doesn't happen until we recognize that we have a problem. And so until the simple recognizes that I'm simple and I really need wisdom, they're going to continue to be simple. And for as long as the mocker continues to mock and doesn't realize that they have a problem mocking, maybe for that individual, they realize that they have a problem when they find themselves completely isolated and very alone in life. Did you ever wonder why you don't have friends? Maybe it's because of the way you treat them. Did you ever think about that? And in that situation, it might just be that some friend who's leaving the door of the relationship just shares with them on their way out from that friendship saying, you know what? I get why you don't have friends, because if you treat everyone else the way that you're treating me right now, then no one's going to hang around with you. But until someone recognizes their need for help, their need for change, there is no hope for them. They think that it all originates with themselves, and I only need me. It doesn't work relationally. It doesn't work with life. It certainly doesn't work with salvation. Because with the Lord, we recognize that, God, I need you. In the context of the Proverbs, I need you to give me wisdom, Lord. In the bigger context of life and eternal life, Lord, I recognize that I need your salvation. I need your forgiveness. I need you to deliver me from me. I need you to change me, God. I've tried changing myself, and I just can't do it. Lord, is there any way that I could just be given a whole new identity? Is there any way I could be given a whole new nature? Hello, this is the gospel. Jesus Christ comes and he moves into the person's life who recognizes, Jesus, I need you. I need you to come and help me, to save me, to forgive me, to change me. And he says, oh, I'd love to do that. But it doesn't begin until the person recognizes their need and they humble themselves to ask for help. God, I need your help. I need your forgiveness. I need your might. I need your strength. And the same thing is true with wisdom in and of itself. That until the person recognizes their need for it, they're going to continue. And so at this, because wisdom has been giving the invitation, but has just been disdained, she says, she said you need to turn at my rebuke in verse 23, and if you do, surely I will pour my spirit out upon you. But they don't respond. They continue in their disdain and in their folly. And in verse 24, she says, because I have called and you refused, I have stretched out my hand and no one regarded, because you disdained all my counsel and would have none of my rebuke. Verse 26, wisdom says, I also will laugh at your calamity. Now you hear that and you kind of go, well, that doesn't sound very nice for wisdom to do that. I mean, is that kind of like what the Lord does? Like we refuse his counsel and then the Lord laughs at us when we get stuck in this difficult place? I like to think the Lord's a little more compassionate, but please learn what is being said here, okay? Wisdom responds by laughing at them, and you'll recognize as we go through this that there really is no restoration on wisdom's part, right? I mean, let's just continue to read through here. In verse 27, it says, when your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, it says, then they will call on me, wisdom says, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. And you're thinking, that doesn't sound very nice. And there's something that you need to understand specifically about wisdom. Please hear this. Wisdom is preventative. Wisdom is not something you use to fix something that's broken. Wisdom is something you exercise so that you don't get broken in the first place. Wisdom is what keeps you from falling into the snares. Wisdom is what keeps you from getting into trouble. Wisdom is what keeps you from breaking relationships and hurting other people. Wisdom is what keeps you from being taken advantage of by others. That's what wisdom does. Wisdom is preventative. It doesn't come and fix what's been broken. The gospel does that for sure. The gospel is all about fixing broken people. But wisdom, and this is outside the context of your salvation, wisdom on a very practical level is about keeping you from getting into predicaments that you need someone else to get you out of. But that wisdom originates from God. And so it's God saying, son, don't walk down that road. It will not end well for you. It never has for anyone who's walked that road. So wisdom is preventative. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's wisdom. It's not a proverb. It's wisdom. And wisdom keeps you from having to put all the pieces back together again. because wisdom keeps you from going through that brokenness altogether. But wisdom needs to be heard, wisdom needs to be received, and wisdom needs to be heeded or exercised. Wisdom is not something that you apprehend after the fact. It doesn't work that way. Wisdom has to be put to use before. Understand this about wisdom. And that's really what this parable is about. That's why wisdom laughs. Wisdom laughs and says, "Oh, are you joking me? Are you kidding?" You know, if wisdom is preventative medicine and it prevents an individual from a disease, but the person refuses the medicine and gets the disease, and they go, "Give me the medicine, give me the medicine, give me the medicine." And the doctor goes, "That medicine won't help you get rid of the disease. That medicine was just to prevent you from getting the disease in the first place. You could take it for the rest of your life, but it isn't going to cure you of it. It was there to keep you from getting it in the first place. It's too late for you to use that for this." That's how wisdom works. When it says there in verse 26, wisdom says, "I also will laugh at your calamity." That word "also" is really key, because that's the indication that prior to that, the mocker had been mocking and laughing. Wisdom, "Oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Wisdom. No one believes that stuff." And then it happens. And wisdom laughs, as if to say this. So this is basically the Bible saying, look who's laughing now. Okay? That's what's happening here. Okay? It goes on through. It says in verse 27 again, "When your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind," because it's going to come. You can't just defy the laws of nature. You can't defy the laws of God. You can't defy the laws of justice. It's not going to happen. And so when it does happen, it says in verse 28, "They will come to me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord." In verse 29, another very key element to this. It all begins with them rejecting the Lord. They reject the fear of the Lord, and in so doing, they're rejecting wisdom, because the Lord is the source of all wisdom. Verse 30 says, "They would have none of my counsel and despised my every rebuke." You know, whether it's the Lord, whether it's wisdom, or whether it's a parent, or whether it's just a friend who has wise counsel for you, the reality is that when someone refuses and disdains, and specifically when they laugh at the wisdom that you give them, and then they go on and the very thing that you were trying to warn them against befalls them, you might, in your compassion, not laugh at them as they might have laughed at you with their smirky little response. But it's not uncommon to not have a great deal of compassion for them. "Sorry, that's about the extent of all I've got to say. Sorry you were so stupid as to think that you had all the answers and that somehow reality was not going to be real for you." And so, be it wisdom or be it those counselors in our own lives, we shouldn't be surprised when there's a lack of compassion on their part, because we've disdained their wise counsel. And the very things that they were trying to protect us from are the things that befell us because we chose them, and that's where the proverb goes. It says in verse 31, "Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their own way and be filled to the full with their own fancies." This is the "you got what you wanted" statement. And I love the first part of verse 31 where it says, "Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their own way." You wanted to do it your way, and now you get to eat the fruit of doing it your own way. I can't take that off of the plate. I can't remove the consequences of your foolishness. Wisdom spoke, wisdom delivered, you refused, you rejected, and now you're having to deal with the consequences of your decisions. Verse 32, "For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil." One of the things we'll identify as we're going through the Proverbs is that the Proverbs are primarily principles and not promises. It's wisdom. And wisdom doesn't guarantee you that you will never fall into difficulty or trial or never make a poor decision in your life. They're principles. They're principles that when we follow them, we discover, wow, life really can be far more stable, and I can be far more secure than it was when I was walking in the foolishness of my own dictates, of when I was my own counselor. Verse 33 again, whoever listens to me, this is wisdom speaking, will dwell safely and will be secure. Why do they dwell safely? Because wisdom in her prudence is very cautious and recognizes that's a big, deep, steep pit. And so out of caution, wisdom says, let's not get too close to it. The fool says, but what's in the bottom of it? And wisdom says, I don't know, go online and ask. I don't know if wisdom really goes online, to be honest, but it's the idea of when you see something that's dangerous, you don't get close to it, you stay far away. You don't walk that path, you don't stand with them, and you don't sit with them. You stay far from them. They will be secure, and check this out, without fear of evil. Not because evil doesn't exist, but because they have learned in wisdom to just remain far from evil. I don't have to come near to evil. The context here probably isn't so much about evil pursuing them, like we would see evil pursuing King David, or like we would see evil pursuing those who evil is seeking to persecute. But it's more so the idea that they're safe from evil because they're not pursuing evil. They're not allowing evil into their thoughts, into their considerations, that they're keeping that safe distance, and that's how wisdom works. Again, it originates with the Lord. And the moment that we depart from the Lord, we are departing from his wisdom. You can't separate the two. The world likes to think that you can. And there's all kinds of great, amazingly, I would even say wise sayings that are out there that don't originate in the Bible, and that's fine. But you can't separate the fear of the Lord from the wisdom of God. You can't order the one a la carte. They're a combination deal. Wisdom comes with God, and where God is, there is wisdom. And that's why in James we're told, if you want wisdom, man, just ask, because the Lord loves to give it. He loves to pour it out on those who are humble and recognize their need for it.